Herodotus lived during the 5th century before the Common Era in ancient Greece. He wrote a narrative summarizing history as it was then known and describing many of the events of his own lifetime. Although direct discussion on his biases and epistemology is saved for the conclusion of the series, on this video you may learn details about a portion of his work. The 8th book, called Urania, The Sailors That Could Not Swim. Know that the events of this book take place after the famous Battle of Thermopylae. The historian begins by outlining the Greek naval forces. He commends the Athenians for sharing their ships with the citizens of other cities. Perhaps this is a clear sign that the Greeks were nearly as if a nation, as opposed to merely separate city-states. The historian also makes a special commendation to the Athenians in the fact that they ceded ultimate naval command to the Spartans. He commends them in the sense of being mature about the matter and thus preserving Greek unity. On this issue, let me quote him as he says,
"For disagreement between those of the same race is worse than war undertaken with one consent by as much as war is worse than peace."
I suspect or believe that an aphorism regarding disagreement between democracies may be crafted out of the analogy. I should now mention, regarding these praises, that though the writer might not have been born in Athens, he is a bit of an Athenian. So much so that in this book he will show a bias concerning an Athenian political controversy. I am referring to his seeming affronts towards Themistocles. Yes, Themistocles grew to become quite controversial. Unfortunately, proper details about him are best learned from Plutarch's biographies. Herein the writer simply starts by accusing the man of receiving bribes or payments from other Greek cities. Wishing to avoid capture, these cities wanted the allies to make an early stand against the Persians. This resulted in an unconclusive naval battle that was allegedly fought at the same time as the final battle at Thermopylae. It was maneuvering as a result of this battle that the Persians were so afflicted by the sea storm mentioned in the prior book. Remember, the storm that Poseidon the Savior granted to Western civilization. LOL. After these battles and storm, Athens and many cities outside the Peloponnesus had to be abandoned. The Athenians gathered their navy and many of their people on the nearby island of Salamis. I found noteworthy how, before leaving, Themistocles himself had a message carved for the Ionian Greeks serving under Persian command. It read,
"Ionians, ye act not rightly in making expedition against the fathers of your race and endeavoring to enslave Hellas. Best of all were it that ye should come and be on our side. Be purposely slack. Remember that ye are descended from us, and that our quarrel with the barbarian took its rise at the first from you."
The intention was to either have the Ionians betray, or to have Xerxes mistrust them. Likewise, most noteworthy, the historian mentions how the Persian monarch attempted to trick his own sailors about the Pyrrhic victory that was the Battle of Thermopylae. I use that term though King Pyrrhus is a couple of centuries later. You may learn about him from Polybius' Histories. Xerxes, the Persian king, hid most of his dead, but Herodotus says the deceit must have been apparent. I imagine that it could not have been kept secret as soldiers talk among each other. Worthy of mention is the event wherein some deserters, men in need, came to the Persians and informed them on various subjects. Among these subjects was the Olympic Games. Of them, a certain commander named Tigranes replied,
"Oh, Madonios, what kind of men are these against whom thou hast brought us to fight, who make their contest not for money but for honor?"
Remember from the prior books that Mardonius is the hawkish general that most insisted on invading Greece. In a digression, the historian then describes a conflict between certain Thessalians and Phocians. The story involves a Phocian soothsayer general named Teleas the Elean. This man enacted some action movie-style military strategies. First, on one occasion, he had all the Phocians cover themselves with white chalk and then make an attack during the darkness of the night. As might be imagined, this tactic allowed the Phocians to keep order in the darkness and frighten the Thessalians. Likewise, this same soothsayer had a very long trench dug and filled with empty jars. The trench was then covered with slight earth and leaves so that the Thessalian horses ended up breaking all their legs. Again most clever, and seems as if out of a movie. These Thessalians, now serving under Xerxes, asked the Phocians for money in exchange of ensuring good graces and treatment from the Persians. The Phocians refused, and Herodotus jocularly says of the matter,
If the Thessalians had supported the cause of the Hellenes, I am of opinion that the Phocians would have been on the side of the Medes.
Now enters the fate of the Oracle of Delphi. The oracle advises all people to flee as he, the god, could take care of himself. To make a long story short, as a Persian force arrived before the oracle, thunder fell onto the barbarians, divine shouts were heard, and most barbarians fled in fear. Make of that what you will. In Athens, the priests at the Acropolis had trouble convincing people that they should abandon the city. Comically, it was believed that a great serpent lived below the Acropolis, and thus believers had the habit of leaving it food, such as large honey cakes. Of course, something would eat the cake. Yet, on the last days, the food was left untouched, thus most believers did believe that they had to leave the city. LOL. I should point out that Herodotus writes as if he knew what was really going on, but he does not denounce the priests or religion. Either way, some people did stay in the Acropolis. Xerxes did have a tough time breaching their defenses and killing them, but he eventually did do so, as well as set fire to the whole city. As for the Battle of Salamis, the historian counts the number of Greek ships as 378. I should note that such a number is far superior to any naval battle of modernity. Thus, it was with naval battles in antiquity. As I was saying, initially the Greek commanders concluded that they had to flee the island of Salamis. The Peloponnesians were already fortifying the Corinthian isthmus, and they wanted to make their stand there. A companion of Themistocles tells him that,
If they set sail with the ships from Salamis, thou wilt not fight any more sea battles at all for the fatherland. For they will all take their way to their several cities, and neither Eurybides nor any other man will be able to detain them or to prevent the fleet from being dispersed, and Hellas will perish by reason of evil counsels.
The Greek commander then conveys this same reasoning to Eurybiades, the Spartan commander-in-chief. Eurybiades agrees and gives Themistocles the chance to convince the other Greek leaders. The Athenian is then quoted as saying,
Hear both ways, and then set them in comparison. If thou engage in battle at the isthmus, thou wilt fight in an open sea, into which it is by no means convenient for us that we go to fight, seeing that we have ships which are heavier and fewer in number than those of the enemy. Engaging in a narrow place with few ships against many, if the fighting has that issue which it is reasonable to expect, we shall have very much the better, for to fight a sea fight in a narrow space is for our advantage.
A Corinthian answers with seeming personal odium, saying that the Greeks should not listen to a man without a city. In response, Themistocles threatens that the Athenians will leave the whole of Greece and settle in Italy or elsewhere. Eurybiades interjects and orders that they must remain on the island. Herodotus has it that they did consider Themistocles' threat was sincere. As for the Persian plans, there is a special mention of Artemisia, the queen of Halicarnassus. She, of all advisors, counsels Xerxes not to fight a sea battle at all. Let me quote her.
Spare thy ships, and do not make a sea fight, for the men are as much stronger than thy men by sea, as men are stronger than women, for the Hellenes are not able to hold out against thee for any long time. But thou wilt soon disperse them, and they will take flight to their several cities, since neither have they provisions with them in this island, as I am informed, nor is it probable that if thou shalt march thy land army against the Peloponnese, they who have come from thence will remain still, for these will have no care to fight a battle in defense of Athens.
Herodotus describes how many in Xerxes' court hoped that Artemisia's disagreement may lose her favor. Yet, Xerxes welcomes her opinion but does not abide by it. He hopes that his subjects will fight most courageously now that he himself will be present watching over them. To be clear, he expects fear of punishment will motivate them to fight harder. LOL. In all seriousness, it is arguable that there is great motivation, effort, and resilience in thinking that a greater being, at least one capable of bestowing recompense or punishment, is overlooking one's manner of being and behavior. This is an element that is not entailed in democracy while implied in monarchy. Surely, one could argue, An ideal constitution of society should include such a thing, a Pontifex Maximus. Needless to mention, further discussion on this topic yields many aphorisms. Back to the historical narrative. Herodotus describes who were the Greek allies at Salamis, chastises those that were absent, and gives a brief history of the races, or groups, that inhabited the Peloponnesus. Subsequently, the historian describes how, since the Greeks were once again clamoring to leave the island, Themistocles devised a trick, a deceitful plan, to force the fight. He told Sikinos, a slave whom he later not only freed but made wealthy, to pretend defecting and misadvise Xerxes that if he did not attack now, he would lose his chance as the Greeks were preparing to sail away. The Persians, therefore, landed a large force in the small island of Sicilia. This one was situated between Salamis and the mainland, and it is the one that Aristides is tasked with capturing and using as a treasury to guard the loot gained from the battle. I hoped that Herodotus would say much about Aristides, but he only says that he was reputed to be
the best and most upright of all Athenians.
Of course, the writer does point out that the great man had been ostracized from Athens, and that he was Themistocles' political opponent. Despite their political differences, however, Aristides offers to help ensure the success of Themistocles' plan. He is the one that convinces the other Greek commanders that the Persians are arraying for battle and have closed all possible path of retreat. I should mention that surprisingly little about the battle is described. The Athenians combated against the Phoenicians, the best of the enemy sailors. The Spartans fought the Greeks Ionians serving under Persia. Some of these did refuse to fight as Themistocles had hoped. Concerning the warrior queen Artemisia, it should be understood that Herodotus is from Halicarnassus, the city of this now most famous queen. Thus, perhaps, there is an unavoidable bias. He has it that she fought most bravely and only avoided capture by pretending to be Greek. Praising her, Xerxes famously proclaimed,
"My men have become women, and my women men."
The barbarians' casualties were atrocious because most did not know how to swim. It is to be expected as they were conscripted against their will. I feel sorry for them. As for Aristides, his exile or ostracism is revoked, and after the battle he returns to Athens. I should mention, unlike Themistocles, he died poor as he never cared for wealth. Not that Themistocles died in a very nice fashion at all. Despite their differences, both are worthy of admiration. Herodotus also makes a special note, in adulation, of the mailing system that the Persians had constructed. It was a horseman relay system. With it, Xerxes sent a message of the defeat to Susa. Herodotus describes the wallowing that the barbarians fell into. You may experience it nearly firsthand from Aeschylus' play, The Persians. I will end this video here. The next section of Book 8 includes a criticism of slavery, many psychological observations, and Xerxes' retreat. In the previous videos, Herodotus mentions things such as the 7 sages of antiquity, the flaws in Sparta, how Athens became a democracy, and the history or mythology of Egypt and barbarian Europe. If you did not see these things, make sure to catch up. Now, to pique your curiosity, to motivate you to watch the last video of the series, I gift you a teaser sample of one of the many aphorisms I crafted as I read this author.
Since learning is safer than discovery, learners may be evolutionarily successful, but explorers are ever an aberration.
If you enjoy or gain from my aphorisms, know that I have thousands. I will be writing books with short thematic essays composed out of aphorisms. These essays are profound and intriguing yet easy to read. For very cheap copies, look up Protagoras Pause in the Amazon website. I repeat, Protagoras Pause, that's my name.